Welcome here to the Ridealong channel, live on board in Vassiliki. Now this is being released in multiple ways just now. You're live on the YouTube channel, the Ridealong channel, you're live on the podcast system and series that goes along with that. It's a new little bit we're adding into this that I'm calling the board meeting series. That's right, if you're listening to this on the podcast, this is being recorded live on a windsurf board in Vassiliki, Greece. I'm marginally powered up, not quite on the plane yet. Actually, as this gust just about hits me, there's my front foot in the foot strap, back foot in the foot strap of a 130 Carve from Starboard and a 6.5 ACX, which is like a no-cam free race sail from 0.7. So if the audio is a little bit different to what you're used to in a podcast, it's because right now I am actually nicely powered up, cruising along at 20-something knots, I'd imagine. And the thought of this series is I'm just going to have a little discussion with myself about windsurfing and whatever the chosen subject is of the day. And today, I think I'm going to discuss analogies. Now, I spend pretty much all of my adult life coaching a number of different sports. And one of the ways that I quite like to get something cemented in students' brains is a good analogy. Obviously, good is a bit subjective. Obviously, some analogies will work for you and click and be like, okay, that makes sense. Other analogies, you're like, nah, that doesn't work for me at all. But I had a good chat with a gentleman I was windsurfing with most of last week on a clinic out here in Vassiliki. So a big shout out to Thanasis to start out straight away. And we were playing with the idea that windsurfing is like driving a car. And there's so many different analogies that can work with that. Now let's see if any of these kind of strike home. And if you're an instructor listening, I'm sure you've got other go-to analogies. So do leave comments if the chosen platform you're on allows you to do so. If it doesn't, link on through to the YouTube channel, the Ridealong channel that is, with me, Cookie, on YouTube. The first analogy I think to start with, windsurfing is like driving a car, is when your car is driving in a straight line, you're not doing anything, you're just sitting on the highway. There are still small bits of movements that are going on to keep you in a straight line. Now, just now I've dropped off the plane. I'm roughly going in a straight line, but my rig is moving slightly. My foot pressure is changing slightly. Whether I'm using my front hand, front foot, back foot, heel, toe. It's not massive, but there's definite adjustments and movements to keep me in a straight line. Just like your hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, some slight changes going on just to keep you in between those lines nicely. The next analogy, just right timing as this gust hits me, is getting going. Now getting going and up and onto the plane like I just did here, now back into both foot straps and planing once again. Going from non-planing to planing, I see it kind of like clutch control. Now when you first start learning to drive a car and learning to windsurf, getting going is a bit jumpy. If you cast your mind back to learning to drive, or I'm sure if you haven't learned to drive yet, but you're going to, you'll talk about kangaroo starts and kick starting, jump starting, or, and this is the great one, over revving or under revving the car. So when you're first learning to drive the car, you're going to need more power. You need more gas, more throttle to get that clutch control to work and the car to start moving. As you get better and better at driving and understanding the clutch and the gas, the clutch and the throttle, you'll find that you can then ease off the gas quite a lot. And in fact, you can control your acceleration gently just using the clutch. Same idea with windsurfing. As we get better, we need a lot of power. And possibly, if you're struggling to get the board going, adding half a meter of sail will really help that out. It's not necessarily necessary, but as we're learning, it can help us. The better you get, the less and less power you're going to need. next analogy I quite like with cars and related to cars is a larger car will need a larger engine. A heavier chassis will need a bit more grunt. And that's very much the same with windsurfing. As much as I'll arrive at the beach and check out what other people are using, I then need to take into account how much they weigh to try and work out what sail size is right for me. As well as how good they are to work out what's right for me. Just because there's all that extra power or bigger sail doesn't necessarily mean it's faster though. And that's an interesting analogy just there, is more power doesn't necessarily mean more speed. You have a very powerful truck that can lift very heavy objects, but its high speed is relatively low. Whereas some sort of a sports car might have a slightly smaller engine, but its higher speed will be much more. Here we go, podcast people, bearing away, broad reach, oversheet slightly into a jibe, foot change, clue first exit, rig flip, drop and push for the exit. If you're on your way to windsurfing and you're just listening to this as a podcast in the car, I hope this is giving you a bit of inspiration, not the car analogies as such, but just listening to that rattling water underneath me. To the car analogies then. Practice makes permanent, not perfect. Got a very good friend of mine who's been driving his whole life. He's got a number of years on me, let's say. He's been practicing and driving his whole life, but he is far from perfect. All the practice that he's been putting in, I'd say if anything, has cemented his bad habits when it comes to driving a car. And I think that's a big one for windsurfing. You may well have been windsurfing your whole life, practicing and practicing, but practicing does not make perfect. Practicing makes permanent. When you get good coaching, and we're practicing and developing and changing and adapting our practice, that's where things really start to cement in the right way. Perfect practice can make perfect, or even somewhere close to it. I'm just going to refer back to that idea of the clutch control to get the board going, because I think that works quite well with cars and boards. And if you drive a number of different cars, if you get the opportunity to try a different one, what you'll find is that the clutch control, or the biting point, the point where the power and the clutch actually get to start the car rolling, they're slightly different on every car. They're not in the exact same place. And windsurfing is very similar to that. Different sails match with different boards differently, and can get you going in different ways. They're not all one size fits all. It's not all the same clutch control will get you going and up to speed. Sticking with that idea of clutch control and getting the board or getting the car going, there's not just one way to get a car moving. You don't have to use the throttle and the clutch in the same way. And at different times, you'll need to adapt that. In its simplest form, if you're pointing down a hill, it's very easy to get the car going. A bit of gravity can help you out. That's the same with windsurfing. If you're struggling, if you're a little bit underpowered, pointing downhill, or the windsurfing term, getting going on a wave, pushing down a wave can give you that extra little bit of speed or power that you might be missing. But on a similar line, getting going uphill, the classic hill start while you're learning to drive your car is quite tricky. So getting going in rougher water, where you're constantly getting waves pushed into you, you can't really use them to help you, you're just getting pushed around a little bit. That will clearly make things harder to get going. Kind of linking that goes a bit looser, but if your car is on grass, on mud, on gravel, or on a nice smooth road, things are going to start feeling slightly different as well. You have more or less grip when you start to go or don't go. So you'll need to adapt that clutch control to make it work for whatever conditions you happen to be in. Another, I'm kind of stretching these analogies a little bit, but moving your driving seat forwards or backwards can completely change how that car feels. Suddenly the pedals feel different, the steering wheel feels different. Feels like the gear stick's in a different place. And it's similar with moving your boom up and down, moving your foot straps to different holes or making them bigger and smaller. And actually you might have had your car seat in the same place your whole life. Someone's borrowed your car, it's in a different place for some reason. You might discover it's actually quite comfortable having the backrest a bit more vertical or a little bit more horizontal. And I strongly advise you to play around with that with windsurfing. There are different times that you'd set up your kit differently. But if you're not sure, obviously ask around, obviously watch more videos, listen to more podcasts where I'm chatting about this kind of stuff. But just fiddle around with it. Give it a go. Worst that can happen is you'll find what you really don't like, and then maybe reverse it and you'll find what you really do like. While I'm on that subject, most common things I see wrong with people setting up their systems, setting up their windsurf gear, let's say. Boom's too low and harness line's too short. The most common faults or things I need to change when I test out other people's kit. So your first starting point, I'd say, is try your harness lines longer and your boom higher just to see how it feels. Very underpowered. Coming around a slow jibe. Now, maybe some of those analogies worked for you, maybe some of them were awful. Either way, let me know in the comments just down below. That is, of course, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. And I reckon just as I get off the board, I'm going to think of a couple of other analogies that would work for me. Would work for windsurfing in relation to a car, that is. But there's so many cool analogies around. So what do you use in your teaching, or what works for you? It doesn't have to be car related. Let me know in those comments just down below. I look forward to having a little read through. I'll try and pin the best ones that I like up at the top. And you never know, I might even add them to the description of this video just so people can find them a little bit clearer.